Security guards dragged Kira through the narrow corridors of Arcturus Station. While her silver skin burned with shame and her violet eyes leaked tears, she refused to acknowledge. The metal floors beneath her bare feet felt cold against her skin, as dozens of alien and human faces turned to stare at the spectacle. Some whispered in languages she recognized, while others simply watched, with the detached curiosity reserved for public drama. "Move faster, girl," growled the Terran guard, holding her left arm. His grip left marks on her already bruised skin. "The transport leaves in 20 minutes and Captain Rodriguez doesn't like delays." Behind them walked Vera, Kira's stepmother, her own silver, Valdorian features twisted into what might have passed for concern if anyone bothered to look closely enough. She carried a small datapad and wore the expensive robes that had once belonged to Kira's father. The same robes he had promised would someday be Kira's when she came of age, please. Kira whispered for what felt like the 100th time that day. "I can work, I can pay you back. Just don't send me to the colonies." Vera's response came without even looking up from her datapad. "The legal documents are already processed. You are no longer my responsibility, and I have no obligation to house the child of a dead miner. The frontier colonies need workers, and you are old enough to contribute to society, instead of being a burden." The words hit harder than any physical blow could. Kira had heard them before during the 3 months since her father died, in what officials called an unfortunate mining accident. She had watched Vera systematically remove every trace of her father from their small apartment while claiming his possessions as payment for Kira's care. The few items Kira tried to hide away had been discovered and confiscated just days before the deportation order arrived. They reached the docking bay where transport ship Meridian waited with its cargo. Bay doors open like the mouth of some mechanical beast. Other deportees sat on metal benches inside, mostly humans who had overstayed work visas or committed minor crimes. None of them looked at Kira directly, but she could feel their curiosity about why a Valdorian child was being sent away on a human transport. "Ah, there she is," called Captain Rodriguez as he approached the group. He was a weathered human in his 50s with kind eyes that seemed genuinely sorry for the situation. "I was hoping maybe the family situation had been resolved." "No changes," Vera replied curtly. "The girl's passage is paid through to Kepler Station, where she will transfer to a colony ship. All documentation is in order." Captain Rodriguez looked down at Kira with an expression that reminded her painfully of how her father used to look at injured animals they encountered during mining trips. "What's your name, child?" "Kira," she managed to whisper. "Kira Shenval." "Well, Kira Shenval, I want you to know that my crew will treat you with respect during the journey. We'll make sure you get proper meals and a safe place to sleep. The colonies aren't as bad as some people make them sound." But Kira knew better. She had overheard Vera talking to her legal advisor about the frontier colonies. They were barely habitable worlds where single individuals struggled to survive harsh conditions while mining. Operations extracted whatever resources made the effort worthwhile. Children sent there rarely lived long enough to become adults. The security guards guided her toward the transport, but as they passed a maintenance access panel, Kira noticed it had been left slightly open. Years of exploring the station with her father during his off-duty hours meant she knew these service tunnels better than most adults. In one desperate moment, she twisted free from the guard's grip and threw herself through the narrow opening. "Stop her," Vera shouted. But Kira was already crawling through the maintenance shaft as fast as her small frame would allow. Behind her, she could hear the guards trying to follow, but their larger bodies couldn't fit through the same spaces. She crawled through darkness guided only by memory and the faint emergency lighting that marked safe pathways. Her knees scraped against metal edges and her silver skin collected grease and dust. But she kept moving until the voices faded into the distance. The maintenance tunnels formed a complex network throughout the station, and Kira had spent countless hours exploring them with her father. He had taught her which areas were safe and which ones contained dangerous machinery or electrical systems. Now that knowledge became her salvation as she navigated toward what she hoped might be freedom, or at least a temporary escape. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Kira found an access panel that opened into the station's residential district. She had never been in this section before because it housed human families, and her stepmother had always forbidden her from associating with what she called inferior species. She pushed through the panel and found herself in a small corridor lined with apartment doors. The lighting here was warmer than in the commercial sections, and she could hear sounds of family life from behind the doors. Children laughing, adults talking, the general noise of people living their lives without fear of deportation. But her escape had cost her. The crawling and climbing had reopened wounds from Vera's last punishment, and exhaustion was catching up with her malnourished body. She managed to walk perhaps 50 meters before her legs gave out, and she collapsed against the wall. Blood from her knees stained the clean floor, and her silver skin had taken on a grayish tint that indicated serious dehydration. Footsteps approached, and Kira looked up to see a human male walking toward her. He appeared to be in his early 40s with brown hair that was starting to show gray and kind eyes that immediately reminded her of her father. He wore the simple coveralls of a station maintenance worker and carried a tool bag that suggested he was heading to or from a repair job. "Hey there," the human said softly as he knelt down beside her. "Are you hurt?" Kira tried to stand, but her body wouldn't cooperate. All the fear and desperation of the past few months finally overwhelmed her defenses, and tears began streaming down her face. "Please don't call security." She managed to whisper, "Please don't send me back." The human, David, she would later learn, studied her face with concern. "What's your name?" "Kira," she replied. "Kira Shenval." "Well, Kira, I'm David Chen, and I think maybe you need some help." Steam rose from David's coffee cup as he stared at the small Valdorian girl sleeping on his couch. 3 days had passed since he found her collapsed in the corridor outside his apartment, and he still wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into. The smart thing would have been to call station security immediately, but something about her desperate plea had reminded him of his own daughter Lucy in those final moments before the transport accident. Kira stirred and opened her violet eyes. They were clearer now after proper rest and nutrition, but still held the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "You didn't turn me in," she observed quietly. "Not yet," David admitted. "But we need to talk about what happens next. You can't hide here forever, and there are people looking for you. Vera found out I escaped. Your stepmother filed a theft report claiming you stole family jewelry before running away. She's hired private security to search for you, and they have legal authority to enter any residence on the station." Kira's silver skin paled to an almost white shade. "She's lying. I never took anything that belonged to her. Everything she has belonged to my father and should have been mine when I came of age." David had spent the past 2 days researching Valdorian family law using his station computer access. What he discovered made his engineer's mind spin with the complexity of inheritance rules that seemed designed more to protect property than children. According to the legal database, Valdorian law recognizes stepparents as full guardians with complete authority over stepchildren's lives and property. "But that's not fair," Kira protested. "My father made me promise to be strong and independent. He said I was smart enough to make my own choices about my future." "Fair doesn't seem to be a major consideration in these laws," David replied. "However, I did find something interesting. Human adoption law operates under different principles, and there might be a way to use that to your advantage." Kira sat up straighter. "Adoption? It's complicated. First, we would need to prove that remaining under Valdorian guardianship would cause you significant harm. Then we would need to demonstrate that a human guardian could provide better care. The process typically takes months and requires substantial legal fees. You would do that? For someone you barely know?" David was quiet for a long moment. The truth was that helping Kira felt like the first meaningful thing he had done since losing his own family. For 2 years, he had simply gone through the motions of living, working, his maintenance shifts, eating his meals alone, sleeping in a bed that felt too big. But watching Kira slowly begin to trust him had awakened something he thought had died with Lucy. "I know what it feels like to lose everything," he finally said, "and I know what it's like when no one seems to care enough to help." Before Kira could respond, the apartment's communication system chimed with an incoming message. David's heart sank as he recognized the official seal of station. Administration. Mr. Chen, this is Administrator Walsh's office. Please report to Conference Room 7 at 1400 hours for a matter concerning harboring of unauthorized persons. Failure to comply may result in criminal charges. They know, Kira whispered. Vera found out where I am. David checked his chronometer. They had less than 3 hours before the mandatory meeting, maybe not. This could just be standard procedure, but we need to be prepared for the possibility that you'll be taken into custody. I won't go back to her, Kira said with surprising firmness. I won't go to the colonies either. I'd rather die here on the station. Hey, none of that talk, David said. We're not giving up yet. There are still options we haven't explored. He activated his communication terminal and began searching through the station's legal directory. Most lawyers specialized in commercial disputes or standard criminal cases. Only one name appeared under interspecies family law, Rita Santos, a human attorney with offices in the business district. Her hourly rates were far beyond what a maintenance worker could afford. Rita Santos, David muttered as he initiated contact. Let's hope she has a generous streak. The connection established, and a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and graying black hair appeared on the screen. Mr. Chen, I assume this is about the Valdorian girl who's been all over the security bulletins. I wondered when someone would call about her case. You know about Kira? Word travels fast in legal circles, especially when it involves potential interspecies custody disputes. Those cases tend to set precedents that affect everyone. Rita leaned back in her chair. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Chen. This type of case requires significant resources, and the outcome is far from certain. Valdorian family law strongly favors biological and legal guardians. What would it cost? For a case this complex? Probably more than you make in 2 years. However, I've been following the details through my contacts in security. If even half of what I'm hearing about this girl's treatment is true, then someone needs to advocate for her regardless of financial considerations. David felt a spark of hope. Are you saying you'll take the case? I'm saying I'll meet with both of you and evaluate the situation. If I believe we have a reasonable chance of success and the child genuinely needs protection, then we can discuss payment arrangements later. Can you bring her to my office at 1600 hours? We have a mandatory meeting with station administration at 1400. Then I'll meet you there. Administrator Walsh called me an hour ago asking for consultation on interspecies legal matters. This situation has already become much bigger than a simple custody dispute. After ending the communication, David turned to find Kira staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Why are you doing this? She asked. I'm not your responsibility. I'm not even human. No, you're not, David agreed. But you're a kid who needs help, and maybe I need someone to help too. What do you mean? David looked at the picture of his wife and daughter that still sat on the small table beside his chair. I lost my family 2 years ago in a transport accident. Since then, I've been just existing instead of really living. Taking care of you. These past few days has reminded me what it feels like to have a purpose beyond just maintenance schedules and repair reports. Kira was quiet for several minutes when she finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, David. Be my dad. I promise I'll be good. I'll work hard and I won't cause trouble. I just don't want to be alone anymore. The words hit him like a physical blow. They were almost exactly what Lucy had said during her last moments in the medical bay when she realized her injuries were too severe. Please don't leave me, Daddy. I promise I'll be good. Okay, David heard himself saying. Okay, Kira, we'll figure this out together. Rain drummed against the windows of David's apartment as he watched Kira attempt to use human eating utensils for the 4th morning in a row. Her silver fingers struggled with the unfamiliar grip required for a fork while she concentrated on the scrambled eggs he had prepared. Valdorians typically ate with their hands or specialized tools that accommodated their longer digits. It's okay to eat however feels comfortable, David said gently. We don't have to change everything about who you are. But if I'm going to live among humans, I should learn human ways. Kira replied with the serious tone she used when discussing practical matters. My father always said adaptation was the key to survival in space. Over the past week since their meeting with Administrator Walsh, they had settled into an unusual routine while waiting for the legal proceedings to move forward. Rita Santos had managed to obtain a temporary protection order that prevented Vera from removing Kira from the station, but the long-term custody case would take months to resolve. David had taken emergency family leave from his engineering duties, something he had never used even after losing Sarah and Lucy. His supervisor had been surprisingly understanding once. Rita explained the situation. Apparently, several humans on the station had been following Kira's case through local news feeds, and public opinion was largely sympathetic. "Tell me about your homeworld," David said as they finished breakfast. "What? Was it like growing up there?" Kira's expression grew distant. "Beautiful but harsh. The sky was always purple during day cycles, and the mountains were made of crystal that sang when the wind blew through them. My father worked the deep mines extracting rare metals for Starship construction. We lived in a small house near the mining complex with other workers' families. What happened to your mother?" "She died when I was very young. Some kind of genetic disease that affects Valdorian females. My father never talked about it much, but I could see the sadness in his eyes whenever I asked questions." Kira picked at her eggs with her fingers, having given up on the fork. "After she died, my father focused everything on his work and taking care of me. He used to say I was the only thing that kept him connected to hope. Then he married Vera. That was 3 years ago. He said he was lonely, and that I needed a mother figure to help guide me as I grew older." Kira's silver skin darkened slightly with what David had learned was the Valdorian equivalent of blushing. "I think he was afraid of raising a female child without female guidance. Valdorian culture has very specific expectations for how young women should behave." "What kind of expectations?" "Obedience to male authority figures, preparation for marriage and child rearing, focus on domestic skills rather than technical or intellectual pursuits." Kira's voice carried a tone of frustration. "My father was different, though. He taught me about mining operations and starship engines. He said intelligence was the most valuable thing a person could possess regardless of gender." David smiled. "He sounds like a wise man." He was. But Vera disagreed with his approach. From the moment she joined our household, she tried to change how I was being raised. She took away my technical manuals and replaced them with books about proper female deportment. She enrolled me in cultural training classes instead of the advanced mathematics courses my father had chosen. Did your father know about this? I tried to tell him, but Vera was very careful to make changes only when he was working long shifts in the deep mines. By the time he returned home each day, he was too exhausted to notice the details of my daily education. Kira's violet eyes filled with tears. I should have been more insistent. I should have made him understand what was happening. You were just a child. It wasn't your responsibility to manage adult relationships. David's words seemed to comfort her somewhat. Over the past week, he had learned that Kira blamed herself for many things that were clearly beyond her control. The guilt and self-doubt reminded him painfully of his own feelings after the transport accident that killed his family. David, Kira said quietly, can I ask you something personal? Sure. What happened to your wife and daughter? You mentioned an accident, but you've never given me details. David set down his coffee cup and stared out the rain-streaked window. He had avoided this conversation, partly because talking about the accident still caused him physical pain, and partly because he wasn't sure how much emotional burden a traumatized teenager could handle. They were traveling to visit Sarah's sister on Titan Station. The transport ship suffered a catastrophic engine failure during the jump to hyperspace. Everyone aboard was killed instantly. The words came out flat and mechanical. The investigation concluded that it was caused by metal fatigue in a critical engine component. No one was at fault, just one of those random tragedies that happen in space. How long ago? 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days. David realized how precisely he had been counting. Lucy was 12 years old. She loved mathematics and wanted to be an engineer like her old man. Sarah was a teacher in the station's primary school. She had this amazing ability to make every child feel special and valued. Kira reached across the table and placed her small silver hand over his larger human one. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." David looked at her violet eyes and saw genuine compassion there. "You know, in some ways helping you has been helping me too. For the first time since the accident, I have a reason to get up in the morning besides just going through the motions." "Is that why you decided to fight for me?" "Because I remind you of your daughter." David considered the question carefully. "At first, maybe. But over this past week I've gotten to know you as your own person. You're brave and intelligent and kind despite everything you've been through. You deserve to have someone in your corner fighting for your future, even though I'm not human. Especially because you're not human. Lucy used to ask me about alien species and whether we would ever have friends who came from other worlds. I always told her that the universe was big enough for all kinds of families." David squeezed Kira's hand gently. "I think she would have liked you." They were interrupted by a chime from the communication system. Rita Santos appeared on the screen, wearing her professional expression. "David, I need to see both of you in my office as soon as possible. There have been developments in Kira's case. Good developments or bad developments?" David asked. "Complex developments. Vera has retained a high-profile legal firm from the Valdorian homeworld, and they're claiming that human adoption of a Valdorian child violates interspecies cultural preservation treaties. On the positive side, I've been contacted by someone who claims to have information about Kira's father's death that might be relevant to the custody hearing." David looked at Kira, whose silver skin had gone pale again. "We'll be there in an hour." After ending the communication, Kira stood up abruptly and began pacing around the small apartment. "This is my fault. I should have just accepted deportation to the colonies instead of causing all these problems for you." "Stop that," David said firmly. "You did nothing wrong by asking for help, and you're not causing problems for me. You're giving me a chance to do something meaningful with my life again. But what if the legal battle becomes too expensive? What if you lose your job because of the time you're spending on this case? What if Vera wins and I get sent away anyway?" David stood up and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. "Then we'll deal with those problems when they happen. But right now, today you're safe and we're going to keep fighting. Rita seems confident that we have options. You really want me to be part of your family? Even though I'm different? Even though I don't understand human customs? Even though taking care of me will change your entire life?" David looked into her violet eyes and saw the same desperate hope that had first motivated him to help her. "Kira, family isn't about being the same species or following the same customs. It's about choosing to care for each other even when things get difficult. And yes, I really want you to be my daughter if you'll have me as your father." Kira threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Rita Santos spread documents across her conference table like a general planning for battle, while David and Kira watched nervously from their seats. The past 2 weeks had transformed the simple custody case into something much larger and more complex. News feeds throughout the station carried daily updates about what reporters were calling the interspecies adoption crisis. Ambassador Thrix arrived this morning with a full diplomatic delegation. Rita began without preamble. "They're claiming that allowing humans to adopt Valdorian children sets a dangerous precedent that could undermine cultural preservation across multiple species. Vera's new legal team is using this argument to frame you, David, as someone attempting to commit cultural genocide." "That's ridiculous," David protested. "I'm trying to save one child from abuse, not destroy an entire culture." "Logic and legal strategy don't always align," Rita replied. "However, we have some advantages they weren't expecting. Dr. Nolan Reed contacted me yesterday with information about Kira's father's death that changes everything." Kira straightened in her chair. "Dr. Reed knew my father? They worked together on several mining safety projects. Apparently your father was investigating irregularities in the mining operations shortly before his accident." Rita pulled out a datapad and activated a holographic display. "According to Dr. Reed, your father discovered that someone was deliberately weakening structural supports in certain mine shafts to make them appear more dangerous than they actually were." "Why would anyone do that?" David asked. Insurance fraud. If a mine appears too dangerous to operate safely, the insurance companies pay out full claims without thorough investigation. The mining company gets their money, while avoiding the actual costs of extraction. Kira's silver skin had taken on a grayish tint. You're saying my father was murdered? We don't have proof yet, but Dr. Reed believes your father was getting close to exposing the fraud when his accident occurred. The timing is suspicious, and there were irregularities in the safety investigation that followed. What does this have to do with my custody case? Kira asked. Everything. If we can prove that Vera was involved in or benefited from your father's death, it undermines her legal standing as your guardian. Valdorian law doesn't allow people who harm family members to retain custody of surviving children. David felt a surge of hope. How do we prove it? That's the difficult part. We need access to Valdorian corporate records and mining safety reports from the time of the accident. Ambassador Thrix has blocked our access to those documents claiming diplomatic immunity. There has to be another. Wait, David said. Actually, there might be. I've filed a motion for emergency protective custody based on evidence of past abuse. If we can convince the court that Kira faces immediate danger from returning to Vera's custody, we can freeze the deportation proceedings while we investigate the mining accident. Rita activated another section of the holographic display showing medical records and photographs. Kira, I need to ask you about these injuries that Dr. Park documented. When David first brought you for medical treatment, can you tell me how you received them? Kira looked uncomfortable and glanced at David before answering. Vera said I was clumsy and disobedient. She said Valdorian children needed firm discipline to develop proper character. These bruises on your arms are consistent with being grabbed and shaken violently. The cuts on your back appear to have been made by some kind of rigid implement. Were you ever struck with objects? Sometimes when I asked too many questions about my father's work or when I tried to access his personal files after he died. Kira's voice became very quiet. She said I was trying to steal family property and that ungrateful children deserved punishment. David felt anger building in his chest over the past month of living together. Kira had slowly revealed more details about her treatment under Vera's care. Each new revelation made him more determined to protect her. I know this is difficult, Rita said gently, but we need you to testify about these experiences in court. Ambassador Thrix and Vera's legal team will try to characterize your relationship with David as inappropriate or manipulative. We need to show the court that your request for human adoption comes from genuine fear for your safety, not from being influenced by David. What if they don't believe me? Kira asked. What if they think I'm lying to avoid going to the colonies? Then we'll deal with that possibility. But Kira, you need to understand that this case has become about much more than just your individual situation. There are other mixed families on this station and throughout human space. If we lose, it could affect their rights as well. Before anyone could respond, the conference room's communication system activated. Ms. Santos, this is station security. We have a situation in your outer office that requires immediate attention. Rita activated the security display, and they could see several Valdorian males in formal diplomatic attire standing in her waiting area. One of them held what appeared to be an official document, while others seemed to be scanning the room with handheld devices. That's Ambassador Thrix, Rita said grimly. They're probably here with another injunction or custody order. What do we do? David asked. You and Kira use the back exit and return to your apartment. Stay there until I contact you. Don't answer the door for anyone except station security with proper identification. As they gathered their belongings, Kira suddenly stopped. Rita, what happens if they take me away before the hearing? That won't happen. I have a legal protection order that... But what if it does? What if they find some legal way to override your order? Rita looked directly into Kira's violet eyes. Then David and I will come get you. I promise you that. They left through the building's maintenance exit and made their way back to David's apartment through service corridors. Once inside, David activated all the security locks and closed the window screens. The apartment felt smaller and more confining than usual. I'm scared, Kira admitted as they sat on the couch. Not just about being taken away, but about what this is doing to you. You've given up so much to help me, and now you might lose even more. What do you mean? Your job? Your reputation? Your peaceful life before I came along, you had a simple existence without complications. Now you're involved in legal battles and diplomatic incidents. David was quiet for a moment. Kira, do you remember what you said to me that first day when I found you in the corridor? I asked you not to call security. After that, you said, please don't send me back. Do you know what I heard in your voice? Kira shook her head. The same thing I heard in my daughter's voice. During her last moments, pure fear combined with trust that somehow an adult would find a way to make things better. I couldn't save Lucy. But maybe I can save you. I don't want to be a replacement for your daughter. You're not your Kira. You're brave and smart and stubborn in ways that Lucy never was. But helping you has reminded me that I still have the capacity to care about someone other than myself. That's a gift you've given me, not a burden. The apartment's communication system chimed with an urgent message from Rita. David, Ambassador Thrix has filed an emergency motion claiming that Kira is being held against her will by human authorities. They're demanding immediate access for a welfare check. I've managed to delay it until tomorrow morning, but you need to be prepared. What kind of preparation? David asked. Kira needs to be ready to speak directly to the ambassador and clearly state her preference for human custody. They'll try to intimidate her or convince her that she's making a mistake. She needs to be strong enough to stand up to that pressure. After ending the communication, David turned to Kira. How do you feel about facing Ambassador Thrix tomorrow? Terrified, but also angry. I'm tired of adults making decisions about my life without caring what I want. Kira's silver skin was beginning to show the darker tints that indicated strong emotion. My father taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right even when you're afraid. Then tomorrow we show them what courage looks like. Ambassador Thrix filled the conference room with his imposing presence as he studied Kira, with calculating violet eyes. His silver skin bore the intricate tattoos that marked him as Valdorian nobility, and his formal robes rustled with each deliberate movement. Beside him sat Vera and her new legal advisor, both wearing expressions of barely concealed triumph. Child, you have caused significant diplomatic complications, the ambassador began in heavily accented standard. Your refusal to accept proper Valdorian guardianship has created tensions between our species that could affect trade relationships and cultural exchanges. Kira sat between David and Rita, her small hands clenched tightly in her lap. I didn't mean to cause problems for anyone, I just wanted to be safe. Safe? Vera interjected. You were perfectly safe under my care. I provided food, shelter, and proper cultural education. Your ingratitude and these false accusations of abuse are shameful. They're not false, Kira replied with surprising firmness. You hit me whenever I asked about my father's work. You took away everything that belonged to him and sold it. You told me I was worthless, and that the colonies were the only place suitable for ungrateful children. Ambassador Thrix waved dismissively. Disciplinary measures are necessary for proper child development. What humans consider abuse, we recognize as essential character building. This human, he gestured toward David, has filled your mind with weak concepts about individual choice and emotional coddling. David has been kind to me, Kira said. He listens when I speak, he doesn't hurt me when I make mistakes, he teaches me things instead of telling me I'm too stupid to learn. Kindness without discipline creates weak adults. You have been corrupted by inferior human values and must be returned to proper Valdorian guidance before the damage becomes permanent. Rita leaned forward. Ambassador, with respect, this hearing is about Kira's welfare, not about cultural superiority. The evidence shows nothing more than a child who has been manipulated by human emotional tactics. The ambassador pulled out a data pad. I have here a full psychological evaluation performed by qualified Valdorian specialists. Their conclusion is that this child is suffering from attachment disorder caused by exposure to human parenting methods. David felt his temper rising. That's ridiculous. Kira was traumatized long before she met me. She's been healing from years of abuse. Mr. Chen, your emotional investment in this situation clouds your judgment. Ambassador Thrix stood and walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of Kira. Child, look at me. Do you truly believe that a human can provide better guidance than your own species? Do you wish to abandon your cultural heritage and become something neither human nor Valdorian? Kira looked up at the imposing figure but didn't back down. I want to choose my own family. My father taught me that love and respect matter more than species or cultural rules. Your father was weak. His death was the natural consequence of his failure to follow proper safety protocols. The words hit like a physical blow. Kira's silver skin went completely white, and David saw tears forming in her violet eyes, but before anyone could respond, the conference room door opened and Dr. Nolan Reed entered carrying a briefcase. I apologize for the interruption, Dr. Reed said, but I have evidence that Ambassador Thrix just committed perjury. Rita stood immediately. Dr. Reed, thank you for coming. Ambassador, this is Dr. Nolan Reed, a xenobiologist who worked with Kira's father. I have no interest in hearing from human scientists. Ambassador Thrix replied coldly, you should be interested in this. Dr. Reed opened his briefcase and pulled out several data storage devices, because these contained communications between Kira's father and myself from the weeks before his death, communications that prove he was murdered. The room fell silent. Vera's face had gone pale and her legal advisor was frantically typing on his datapad. Furthermore, Dr. Reed continued, these communications include detailed documentation of the mining fraud, that Kira's father discovered fraud that was being orchestrated by Vera's family mining consortium, with the knowledge and approval of certain Valdorian government officials. Ambassador Thrix's confident demeanor cracked slightly. That is a serious accusation with no supporting evidence. Actually, I have plenty of evidence. Dr. Reed activated a holographic display, mine shaft structural reports that were falsified, insurance claims that were filed prematurely, and most importantly, recorded conversations between Vera and mining supervisors discussing the elimination of threats to their operation. This is fabricated human propaganda designed to. The recordings are in Valdorian and were made using Valdorian communication equipment. Dr. Reed looked directly at Vera, including your voice authorizing the sabotage of safety equipment in Shaft 7 where Kira's father died. Vera stood abruptly. This hearing is about child custody, not ancient mining accidents. These accusations are irrelevant to. They're extremely relevant, Rita interrupted, because Valdorian law specifically prohibits custody rights for individuals who have harmed family members. If Vera was involved in Kira's father's death, she has no legal standing to demand custody. Ambassador Thrix looked genuinely shocked for the first time. Dr. Reed, you are certain of the authenticity of these recordings? Absolutely, I've had them verified by 3 independent forensic specialists. Vera ordered the murder of Kira's father to prevent him from exposing the mining fraud. She then seized his assets and attempted to dispose of Kira by having her deported to the frontier colonies. The room erupted in shouting as Vera's legal advisor began demanding verification procedures while Rita called for immediate arrest warrants. Through the chaos, David noticed that Kira had gone very quiet and still. Kira, he said softly, are you okay? She killed him, Kira whispered. She killed my father and then pretended to care for me while planning to send me away to die. I'm so sorry, I know this is. Before David could finish, the conference room's security alarm activated. This is station security, came a voice over the communication system. We have arrest warrants for Vera Shental and are authorized to take her into custody immediately. As security officers entered the room, Vera turned to Kira with pure hatred in her eyes. You stupid child, you have no idea what you've done without the mining consortium's protection. You'll never be safe anywhere in Valdorian space. She won't be in Valdorian space, David said firmly. She'll be here with me. Ambassador Thrix watched as Vera was led away in restraints. This changes the legal situation significantly. If these accusations are proven in court, the Valdorian government will not oppose human custody. However, Mr. Chen, you should understand that there will be Valdorian extremists who view this as human interference in internal affairs. Your safety, and the child's safety, may be at risk. We'll deal with that when it happens, David replied. After everyone else had left, David, Kira, and Rita sat alone in the conference room. Kira was crying quietly while David held her hand. I don't understand, Kira said. Why did she hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve this? You didn't do anything, Rita said gently. Some people are motivated by greed and power instead of love. Your stepmother saw you as an obstacle to wealth, not as a child who needed care. But now we know the truth, David added, and now we can move forward with making you legally part of my family. Kira looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. You still want me? Even after all this complication and danger? Especially after all this, Kira, you're the bravest person I know. You survived years of abuse and still maintained hope for something better. You stood up to Ambassador Thrix and told the truth even when you were scared. I would be honored to be your father. And I would be honored to be your daughter, Kira replied. But David, I need you to know that I'm not trying to replace Lucy. I just want to be part of your family as myself. That's exactly what I want too, David said. A new chapter for both of us. 6 months later, David watched through the observation deck windows as transport ships arrived and departed from Arcturus Station's docking bays. The familiar rhythm of commerce and travel continued as it had for decades, but his perspective on everything had changed completely beside him. Kira worked on her advanced mathematics homework, while occasionally glancing up to identify different ship types and their probable destinations. That's a Terran cargo hauler, she said, pointing to a massive vessel maneuvering toward Bay 12. Based on the engine configuration, it's probably carrying rare earth metals from the Centauri mining operations. Good eye, David replied. How can you tell it's rare earth metals specifically? The radiation shielding pattern around the cargo bay. My father taught me that different materials require different protection protocols. Kira's voice no longer carried the pain it once did when she mentioned her father. The therapy sessions with Dr. Park had helped her process her grief and trauma. The past months had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. The legal adoption had been finalized 3 weeks after Vera's arrest, with Ambassador Thrix personally overseeing the ceremony to ensure it met both human and Valdorian legal requirements. The case had set a precedent that was already being used to help other mixed families throughout the sector. Kira Chen, David said, testing how the name sounded. It still feels new. Good new or strange new? Kira asked. Perfect new. David smiled as he watched her work through a complex equation. Your math skills are improving faster than I can keep up with. Dr. Martinez says I might be ready for advanced engineering courses next semester. Apparently, having 2 different numerical systems in my background gives me advantages in theoretical calculations. David's promotion to Chief Engineering Officer had come with a significant salary increase that allowed them to move to a larger apartment and establish the small foundation Rita had suggested. The Chen Foundation for Displaced Youth already had its first clients. 2 human children whose parents had died in a mining accident and a young Centaurian whose family had been lost to pirates. Speaking of engineering, David said, I have something to show you. He pulled out a datapad and activated a holographic display showing technical specifications for a new type of life support system. This is what I've been working on during those late-night shifts. It's designed to accommodate the environmental needs of multiple species simultaneously. Kira studied the schematics with growing excitement. This could revolutionize mixed species habitats instead of requiring separate environmental zones. You could have truly integrated communities. That's the idea. But I'm having trouble with the atmospheric regulation algorithms. The calculations get exponentially complex when you add more than 3 different species requirements. What if you approached it from a modular perspective instead of trying to balance everything simultaneously? Kira suggested, create base environmental standards and then add species-specific modifications and zones rather than trying to optimize for everything at once. David stared at the hologram as Kira's suggestion sparked a dozen new possibilities. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Because you're thinking like a human engineer, I'm thinking like someone who's lived in both human and Valdorian environments. Sometimes the best solutions come from combining different perspectives. Their conversation was interrupted by a communication from Rita's office. David, Kira, I have news about Vera's trial. They made their way to Rita's office where she was waiting with Dr. Reed and Captain Walsh. The atmosphere was serious, but not grim. "The Valdorian courts have reached a verdict," Rita began. "Vera has been found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. She's been sentenced to 20 years in a maximum security facility." "What about the other people involved in the mining fraud?" Kira asked. "Most of them have been arrested," Dr. Reed replied. The investigation expanded far beyond what anyone expected. It turns out the fraud was part of a larger criminal network that was operating throughout Valdorian space. Captain Walsh leaned forward. "There's more. The Valdorian government has issued a formal apology for the diplomatic complications and has proposed new treaties regarding interspecies family rights. Your case has literally changed the law for thousands of families." "That's wonderful," David said. "But how does this affect Kira's safety?" "Ambassador Thrix warned us about extremist groups." "There have been some threats," Rita admitted, "but station security has been increased, and the Valdorian government has assigned protective agents to monitor the situation. More importantly, public opinion among both humans and Valdorians has been overwhelmingly supportive." Dr. Reed smiled. "Kira, your father would be very proud of what you've accomplished, not just surviving but turning your experience into something that helps others." After leaving Rita's office, David and Kira returned to their apartment, where they had established a new evening routine. While David prepared dinner, Kira would update their Foundation's database with information about children needing assistance. The work gave her a sense of purpose and helped channel her experiences into positive action. "I got another message from that Rigelian boy whose parents were lost in the transport accident," Kira said as she worked. "His temporary guardians are planning to adopt him officially, but they need help navigating the legal requirements. Did you send him Rita's contact information?"
"Already done. I also connected him with that support group for displaced children that Dr. Park recommended." Kira paused her typing. "David, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that day?" "Sometimes, but I try not to."
"Dwell on hypothetical tragedies. What matters is what actually happened and where we go from here." "Where do we go from here?" David considered the question while stirring their dinner. "Well, you'll finish your education and probably become a better engineer than I am. We'll help more kids through the Foundation. Maybe we'll travel to some of those worlds you used to dream about visiting." "And you? What do you want for your future?" "I want to watch you grow up and become the amazing person you're already becoming. I want to keep learning from your perspective on the universe. And I want to honor the memory of your father and my family by building something positive from all the loss we've experienced." Kira was quiet for several minutes when she finally spoke. Her voice was thoughtful. "I used to think that being expelled from one family was the worst thing that could happen to someone. Now I understand that sometimes losing one family is what leads you to the family you were always meant to have. Your father was right about you being wise beyond your years. He was right about a lot of things, especially about the importance of hope." Kira saved her work and joined David in the kitchen. "Can I help with dinner?" "Always. But let's work on your knife skills. Human cooking techniques might come in handy someday." As they worked together preparing their meal, David reflected on how completely his life had changed. 6 months ago he had been existing rather than living, going through the motions of daily routine without any real purpose. Now he had a daughter who challenged him intellectually, inspired him with her resilience, and reminded him daily that love truly could transcend the boundaries of species and culture. The evening news played softly in the background, featuring a story about the latest group of mixed-species families who had successfully completed adoption, proceedings using the legal precedent established by Kira's case. Dozens of children who might otherwise have remained in institutional care or dangerous situations were now part of loving families. "We did that," Kira said softly as she watched the report. "We helped make that possible." "You did that," David corrected. "You had the courage to ask for help when you needed it most. Everything else followed from that moment of bravery. We both did it together." David smiled as he watched his daughter work beside him in their kitchen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. The Foundation was growing beyond what they had imagined, and there were always more children who needed assistance. His Engineering projects were pushing the boundaries of what was possible in multi-species habitation. And somewhere among the stars, other families were discovering that love could bridge any difference. But tonight they were simply a father and daughter preparing dinner together while planning their future among the stars. It was exactly the life David had never dared to hope for, and exactly the family Kira had always dreamed of finding.